All right, hey everyone, and welcome. Thinking about maybe buying some property in Phuket. It is gorgeous there. But before you go and picture yourself like on that private balcony sipping cocktails, we got to unpack some of the legal stuff first.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Today we're diving deep into Thai property law.
Okay.
We've got excerpts here from a guide, and it's all about what foreigners need to know
Yeah.
when buying property in Phuket. So trust me, it's good stuff to know.
Yeah.
Thai law, well, let's just say it has a few surprises.
Okay.
Like, did you know that, foreigners, they can't technically own land directly
Oh.
in Thailand? So we'll be breaking all that down. We'll talk about different ownership types, the documents you absolutely need, the role of that land department,
Okay.
and all those little, legal potholes you'll want to swerve around.
Gotcha.
So by the end of this deep dive, you'll be set to navigate the Phuket property market like a pro.
Awesome. Yeah, it's really interesting how the law in Thailand, it aims to protect, both the buyers and the land itself. It's not just like a bunch of rules. It kind of reflects like their cultural, how significant land ownership is in Thailand.
That makes sense. So let's jump right into that land ownership thing. How does that even work if foreigners can't own the land?
Well, it's not completely impossible.
Yeah.
Thai law has some options, like leasehold ownership.
Okay.
So that gives you the right to use the property for a certain amount of time. Think of it like a really long rental.
Right.
Typically, it's up to 30 years. The catch, though, the renewal terms, they can be a little all over the place. So that's where having a really good solicitor comes in. They can make sure your lease renewal goes smoothly.
Okay, so leasehold's an option. But what about all those, incredible condos in Phuket? Are those easier for foreigners to buy?
Yeah, the condo route, that's where that famous 49% rule comes into play. Foreigners are allowed to own condo units, but only up to 49% of the total space in the whole building can be owned by foreigners.
Wow.
Imagine you find this amazing condo, in a perfect development, and then later you realize, oh no, the foreign ownership is maxed out.
Oh.
It would be heartbreaking. That's why doing your due diligence, it's super important.
Due diligence. All right, got it. So it really sounds like knowing the rules is super important here. So we've got freehold, which, okay, not really on the table for most of us. Then leasehold, which has that 30-year thing. And then there are condos with their own rules. Let's unpack these types of ownership a little more. What are the need to knows for each one?
Okay, well, starting with freehold, that's kind of the dream, right?
Right.
You own the land and the building, no time limit, but like we said, it's not usually an option for foreigners in Thailand.
So back to leasehold we go. Anything else about that 30-year limit we should be aware of?
Right. So that 30-year limit, it's really important to keep in mind.
Right.
But it doesn't automatically mean you're out after 30 years. Often you can renew the lease, but those specifics need to be really clear, right in your contract. It's kind of like you got to think ahead.
Right.
And be strategic.
Okay, and what about condo ownership? Anything beyond the 49% rule?
The big thing there is making absolutely sure the development, that it follows that rule, that 49% limit. Your solicitor can definitely help check that. And, of course, read all the building regulations, understand those fees. The more you know, the better,
Yeah, totally.
Less surprises.
And lastly, land ownership. We talked about a few exceptions for foreigners. How does that work in practice?
That's where things get a bit tricky. Often what foreigners do is set up a Thai company.
Oh.
Specifically for owning the property.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you make a big investment in the Thai economy, that can open some doors.
Oh.
But we're talking serious investment, not just a beach house kind of thing. This is where you really need that legal expertise. Working with a specialist in Thai property law, that's so important if you want to go the land ownership route as a foreigner.
Okay, so you found this property and you were picturing those Phuket sunsets. What are the steps legally to make that dream a reality?
Well, it's a bit of a process, for sure. But it all begins with finding and evaluating property.
Right.
And this is where you do your homework. Research locations, look at different types of properties, what are the prices, figure out what fits your needs and your budget.
I bet a good real estate agent could be super helpful at this stage, right? But we'll get to their role a bit later.
Absolutely. Next up is due diligence. This is where you verify everything. Is the title deed clean? Are there any legal issues? Do the zoning laws match up with what you want to do? No hidden problems. You don't want any surprises.
So it's like getting a property health check.
That's a great way to put it. And after the due diligence, you move into contract negotiation. So you and the seller, you work out all the specifics, the purchase price, when you'll pay, any special conditions, all that.
And I'm guessing having a legal expert with you during that process is pretty important.
Absolutely. Your solicitor, they'll make sure your interests are protected and everything's written out nice and clear. No legal headaches down the line.
All right, so property's found, due diligence done, contract negotiated. What's the next step?
Usually you make a deposit payment just to secure the property.
Yeah.
It's typically about 10% of the price, kind of a way to show you're serious.
Gotcha. And then the final step.
Exactly. The final payment and then transferring the ownership. So you finish paying and then the ownership is officially transferred over to you. This all happens at the land department.
The land department, so that's where it's official. Sounds kind of intimidating.
It can seem that way, but don't worry, we'll unpack that later. What's important is having that solicitor with you throughout this whole journey.
Let's talk more about them. What does a solicitor actually do when you're buying property in Thailand?
Think of them as your guide through the ins and outs of Thai property law.
Okay.
They give you advice, specific to Thailand, and walk you through those legal twists and turns, explain your rights, help you avoid those legal traps.
Like a legal translator?
Yeah, exactly. They also handle all the paperwork, making sure everything's, accurate, complete, and follows Thai law. We're talking contracts, checking that title deed, basically any legal document.
And if things go sideways, they'll be your advocate, right?
That's right. If anything comes up, any disputes or issues, your solicitor will be right there with you, handling all the communication with the other parties involved.
So having a solicitor, that's non-negotiable. It's like a safety net when you're walking a tightrope.
Exactly. They're your advisor, your advocate, every step of the way.
Okay, we've got the steps. We know we need a solicitor. What about the essential documents? Our guide talked a lot about title deeds. Tell us more about those.
All right, so the title deed, that's your proof, the official document that says, hey, you own this property. But here's the thing. Thailand, they have a few different types of title deeds, each with different rights and restrictions.
So it's not quite as simple as it seems.
Not quite. You've got the Shinote, that's like the gold standard. It gives you full ownership rights. Then there's the Norsor 3 Gore that lets you use the land, but it might have some limitations.
Okay.
And then you've got the Norsor 3, and this one, it's a little more restrictive, and often the boundaries aren't as clear.
So knowing what kind of title deed you're working with, that's pretty important.
Absolutely. It really changes what you can do with the property. Don't worry. Your solicitor, they'll verify the title deed and explain everything to you.
What about that sales and purchase agreement? What should people know about that?
That document, it's like the heart of the deal.
Okay.
It lays out all the terms, everything the buyer and seller have agreed to, the price, how you're paying, any special conditions, the whole 9 yards. You really don't want any surprises hidden in the fine print,
So reviewing it thoroughly, that's a must, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. And do it with your solicitor before you sign anything.
Okay, what about the land department? Where do they fit into all of this?
Okay, so picture the land department like a giant library.
Okay.
But instead of books, it's filled with every property deed in Thailand. It's where ownership is documented, and they've definitely seen their fair share of, paperwork adventures.
I bet.
They have to make sure everything's legal, above board. All the documents are there.
So they're like the property police, making sure everything's by the book.
Exactly. And when a foreigner's buying, they're extra careful to make sure those ownership restrictions, they're all being followed.
Gotcha. So they make it all official. But what about these delays everyone always talks about? Our guide said that the land department, they can be a bit slow. What should we be prepared for?
Well, they handle a ton of transactions, so yeah, delays do happen. A lot of times, it's because documents are missing, or maybe something wasn't filled out correctly. So double check all your paperwork, make sure everything's perfect. And sometimes it's just, bureaucracy. You got to wait for them to process everything.
Patience is a virtue, I guess.
It really is.
Yeah.
But regularly checking in with your solicitor and the land department, that can help things move a little faster.
Good advice. Okay, let's talk money. Property taxes in Thailand, what do we need to know about those?
All right, so a few taxes to keep in mind when you're buying in Thailand. First up, the transfer fee. That's 2% of what the property is worth on the official records.
2%, okay.
And then there's the stamp duty. That's 0.5% of the value, either the official appraisal or the actual price you paid, whichever's higher.
So we're at 2.5% already. Anything else?
Yes. There's also the specific business tax. This applies to specific types of property transactions. It's calculated at 3.3% of the value. Again, whichever's higher, the appraised value or the actual price.
Okay, so factor all those taxes into your budget, right?
Absolutely, it's a must. And on top of that, there are additional legal fees and other costs.
Oh, right. Like what?
What you'll have your solicitor's fees, which depend on how complicated the transaction is. You might have some due diligence costs, translation services, that kind of thing.
So good to have a little cushion, right?
Definitely. Always a good idea to get a breakdown of all those expected fees from your solicitor, before things get too far along.
And what about currency? I know Thailand has some rules about how money is handled in these transactions.
You're right. Most of the time, property transactions in Thailand, they're done in Thai baht. So if you're paying in a different currency, you'll need to exchange it, do that through a Thai bank, and keep all the document from those exchanges, just in case.
Good to know. Okay, so we've covered taxes, fees, and even currency. Now, let's talk about real estate agents. They're a big part of the buying process, but how do you pick a good one? There are so many out there.
Finding the right agent, it's like finding, I don't know, a dance partner.
Okay.
You need someone you can trust, someone who knows what they're doing. Do your research. Look for agents with solid experience in the Phuket market. They know the area, the rules, and have a good track record.
So experience is key. What else should we look for?
Reputation. It's important. Check online reviews, see what people are saying. Were they professional? Did they get the job done? You want someone who's going to be honest and make the whole process smooth.
So basically, finding someone trustworthy and transparent. But what about legally? What are the agent's obligations? What are they responsible for?
Legally, they have to tell you about any problems with the property, anything they know about, no hiding things, no being sneaky. They got to be transparent.
Makes sense. What else?
They have to act in your best interest. That's a big one. Their priority should be helping you find the right place, negotiating a good deal, not just getting their commission.
Right. They're working for you, not just for themselves.
Exactly. And finally, the documents, they have to be accurate. All the paperwork needs to be correct and complete. No missing pages or fuzzy details.
All right. So they're like your paperwork superheroes.
You got it. They're there to make the whole process go as smoothly as possible.
We're almost done with this part of our deep dive, but got to talk about those potential pitfalls. What are some mistakes that buyers often make with Thai property law, and how can our listeners avoid them?
One of the biggest and most expensive mistakes is not taking the time to really understand that title deed.
Right.
Remember, it's not just proving you own the place. It also tells you all about any limitations on the property. Don't just skim it. Really dig into it. Understand what it means for you as the owner.
It's not just a formality then.
Nope, it's crucial.
Uh,
Another mistake is zoning laws, forgetting to check those. Different areas have different rules about what you can do with the property.
right.
You don't want to buy your dream spot only to find out you can't build what you want.
That would be awful.
It happens. And lastly, people often underestimate how much time things take in Thailand.
Okay.
The process can be slow, so be patient, be prepared for that, and factor those potential delays into your plans.
That's like patience is key when buying property in Thailand.
It really is. Okay, let's talk worst case scenario, a legal dispute. What if something comes up, either while you're buying or even after you've bought the property? What should people do to handle it legally?
That's a good question.
First step, gather all your documents, every single one. Contracts, emails, receipts, anything and everything related to the property.
Okay, so documentation is key.
It is. Then talk to a lawyer, a specialist in Thai property law. They can assess the situation, tell you what your options are, and help you navigate the whole process.
So our solicitor friend is back.
Exactly. They'll help figure out the best way to handle things. Maybe you can negotiate or go through mediation, or if you absolutely have to, you can take legal action.
And what about communicating with, the person you're having the dispute with?
It's always worth trying to work things out peacefully, talk it through, be respectful. You never know. Sometimes it's just a misunderstanding that can be cleared up with a conversation.
So try to find common ground before things escalate.
Absolutely. But if that doesn't work, having legal representation is really important.
Okay, we talked about those potential pitfalls, any disputes. Let's end on a good note. What are some key takeaways for our listeners to make sure they're following Thai law every step of the way?
The number one thing, get yourself a qualified solicitor. They're your guide, your advisor, your advocate, all rolled into one. Think of it as an investment
Right.
in peace of mind.
So don't try to cut corners on the legal help.
Exactly. Next, do your due diligence. Don't just believe everything you hear. Check everything out. Look into the zoning. Make sure there are no hidden issues. The more you know, the better off you'll be.
Knowledge is power, especially in the property world. What else?
Make sure you understand the taxes, all those taxes we talked about. Be clear on what you'll owe. and make sure it's part of your budget.
Great reminder. Anything else?
Take your time. Don't rush anything. Ask as many questions as you need. Make sure you're comfortable with everything before you move forward. Buying property is a big decision. There's no need to rush it.
That's great advice. Okay, let's talk about another crucial aspect of buying property, something a lot of people might not think too much about, and that is understanding Thai contract law. What should our listener keep in mind when they're dealing with property contracts in Thailand?
Okay, so remember, a property contract in Thailand, it's a legally binding document. It's not just a piece of paper. It's a serious agreement. It outlines the terms of the sale, the purchase price, the payment details, any special conditions, everything you and the seller have agreed upon.
So it's more than just a handshake deal, it's the real deal legally.
Exactly. And it needs to be crystal clear. Both sides have to understand what they're agreeing to. If anything's unclear, ask questions, get clarification before you sign.
So if anything's even a little bit confusing, don't be shy, ask for clarification.
Yes, absolutely. And what about if someone breaks the contract, what happens?
What are the implications of that?
Oh, in Thailand, breaking a contract, that can land you in legal trouble.
Right.
The person who was harmed, they can go to court, ask for compensation, or even demand that the contract be fulfilled,
Wow.
Thai courts, they take contracts seriously. They'll look at the terms, what everyone intended, the whole picture when they make a decision.
So having a well-written contract is pretty essential.
It is. It's your protection. So when you're negotiating a contract, what's your advice? Any tips?
Well, know what you want.
Okay.
What are your must-haves? What are your absolute deal breakers? Be super clear on that, on your priorities, and be prepared to communicate those clearly.
That's a great point. And remember, listen. Negotiating is a two-way street, It's about finding a solution that works for everyone. So be ready to compromise and try to see things from the other side's point of view.
And don't rush into it.
Exactly. You've got to understand the information, ask questions. Don't be afraid to get legal advice if something's unclear.
Great advice. Now, beyond all the legal stuff, let's talk about the cultural side of things. Buying property in Thailand. Respecting those local customs, their traditions, it matters.
Oh, it's incredibly important.
Yeah.
Thai culture, they place a high value on politeness, on respect, on harmony. And you see that in everything they do, how they interact, especially in business.
So it's about more than just the paperwork. It's about how you approach the whole thing with respect for their culture.
You get it. You know about the way, right?
Yeah.
That's the traditional greeting in Thailand.
Yeah, I've seen it.
You put your palms together and bow your head a little. It's their way of showing respect. It's a small thing, but it means a lot to them.
It shows you respect them and their culture.
Exactly. And dress modestly, especially if you're meeting with officials or if you're visiting any religious places, that shows respect too.
So weigh and dress respectfully. Good starting points. What else should we be mindful of?
Remember that saving face concept we talked about before?
Yeah.
Super important in Thailand. Avoid, getting angry in public or raising your voice. They really value harmony and composure. So if there's any disagreements, stay calm, be respectful.
Keep it cool, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Now, building a good relationship with the seller, that's important too. What are your tips there? Thais, they really like it when you make the effort to understand their culture, their language even.
Right.
Learn a few phrases in Thai, it can make a big difference.
Yeah.
It shows respect.
Like you're trying to meet them halfway?
Yeah, and be patient. Relationships take time, especially in a culture that values those personal connections.
No rushing the sale. It's about building that connection.
Exactly. And think about sharing a meal with them. Food's a big part of their culture. Inviting a seller for a meal, it can help break the ice.
Forget the stuffy meeting room. Let's have some great Thai food and connect.
That's the spirit. Now, how does all of this cultural stuff affect things like negotiations, the legal side of things? What should people keep in mind?
I think it's important to remember, Thais, they're often indirect in their communication, especially if they're trying to avoid conflict or, making someone lose face. So pay attention. There are a lot of unspoken cues. Don't be afraid to ask for clarification if you need to.
Yes, great point. Don't expect everything to be super direct. You got to read between the lines a bit. And be prepared for a more collaborative approach. They value everyone's input. It's not just one person making all the decisions.
So it's more of a team effort.
Exactly. And hierarchy, remember that. Respect for elders, for people in authority. It's very important in Thailand. When you're talking to officials or someone older, be respectful. Use their titles. It shows you understand their culture.
It's all about navigating those social graces.
Exactly. By understanding all these cultural things, you can make your transactions smoother and show respect for their culture, which builds trust.
Great advice. Now let's look ahead into the future. Our guide mentioned some interesting trends in Thai property law, what's coming down the pipeline.
Well, one of the big ones is technology. The Thai government is really pushing for more digital transactions, making it easier and faster to buy and sell property.
So bringing property into the digital age.
Exactly. We're seeing more websites, online resources for searching properties, checking the deeds, even signing those contracts. I think that trend's only going to grow. So if you're tech savvy, you'll have a real advantage.
So brush up on those computer skills. What about changes to the law itself? Any predictions?
It's possible that the rules about how much foreigners can own, those might get a little stricter. More and more foreigners are investing in Thai property.
Right.
So the government wants to find that balance between encouraging those investments, but also protecting the interests of Thai citizens. So keep an eye out for new regulations.
So stay flexible, stay informed.
Absolutely. And I think we'll see more focus on eco-friendly development. Protecting the environment, that's becoming more and more important in Thailand. So expect some stricter rules about how things are built.
So building beautiful homes, but building them responsibly.
That's the idea. And don't forget ASEAN. Thailand's part of that, and that could lead to some interesting legal changes. We might see property laws becoming more similar across Southeast Asia,
Right.
making it easier to buy and sell property in different countries in the region.
So more interconnected, more opportunities for everyone.
Exactly. Definitely something to keep an eye on.
Okay, we've covered a ton of info, different types of ownership, how the legal process works, all those crucial documents.
Yeah, it's a lot.
We even tackled the land department and all the financial stuff and how to find a good real estate agent. Plus, we talked about how to avoid legal problems and what to do if a dispute comes up. Phew, that's a lot to take in.
It is, but remember, knowledge is your best friend when you're navigating the Thai property market.
Absolutely. And we haven't even gotten to the cultural side of things yet. That's coming up next. But before we move on, let's do a quick recap. What were some of the most surprising things we learned? What really stood out to you?
I think a lot of people are surprised to find out that foreigners can't just, buy land outright in Thailand.
Yeah, that's a big one.
But there are other ways to go about it, like those leasehold options or setting up a Thai company.
And that new law, the one from 2019, the Rights over Leasehold Assets Act, that was a game changer, right?
Absolutely. That made leasehold properties way more appealing for foreign buyers.
And those different title deeds, who knew there were so many variations? Knowing the difference between a Chinook and a Norsor 3, that's crucial.
Definitely. And it all comes back to having that solicitor. They can really guide you through it all.
They're essential. They're your legal Sherpa, your advocate, your paperwork guru, your best friend when you're buying property in Thailand.
Couldn't have said it better myself. A good solicitor, that's a must.
All right, welcome back, everyone. So glad you're with us. We're diving into a really important part of buying property in Thailand, and it's something that goes beyond the legal stuff. We're talking about the cultural side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Understanding that cultural context, it's just as crucial as knowing all those laws and rules when you're, buying property there. They're really connected.
So we're not just talking about the rules written down. It's about how things actually work, how people do business in Thailand.
Exactly. And one of the biggest values you'll come across, this idea of saving face.
Okay.
It's deeply embedded in Thai culture, and it really affects how people talk to each other, how they behave, especially, in professional settings.
So let's break that down a bit. What does saving face actually mean, like in a property deal situation?
Think of it like keeping things harmonious, avoiding those confrontations. It's about protecting everyone's dignity, yours too, and handling, delicate topics with respect.
So be sensitive to the social dynamics, make sure there's that mutual respect.
Exactly. Now, in a negotiation, that means, Thais, they're not big on, direct conflict, especially not in public. So you might find the whole negotiation process, it's a bit more subtle, a bit more indirect than what you're used to.
It's a delicate dance. You got to read those unspoken cues, read between the lines.
That's a great way to put it. And when you're making an offer or a counteroffer, make sure you're doing it in a way that lets everyone keep their dignity. Be respectful. Don't be throwing down ultimatums. Aim for that win-win.
Find that compromise where everyone's happy. You mentioned communication styles being different in Thailand. Any tips for our listeners on navigating that?
Well, remember, Thais often use that Indirect communication. They do that to avoid conflict or,
Mhm.
making someone uncomfortable. They might not say no directly. Instead, you might hear maybe or I'll think about it, even
Right.
if they're not really interested.
So that maybe might not really mean maybe.
Exactly. And be patient. Don't try to rush the negotiation or push for a decision too quickly. Building those relationships, it takes time. And in Thai culture, it's really important.
So no rushing into a deal. Take your time, build that trust. We talked earlier about how hierarchy is important in Thai culture. How does that play out in, property dealings?
Showing respect to elders and to those in positions of authority, it's really important in Thai society. So if you're dealing with officials, anyone older than you, make sure you're showing that respect. Use the right titles.
Be aware of that social standing, show respect. It sounds like manners are really important in Thailand.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like if you're talking to someone older than you, use kun and then their first name. That's a sign of respect.
Yeah.
And for government officials, use their official titles.
It's like a code of conduct, all those little things, they really matter. Besides saving face and the hierarchy thing, are there any other values that could affect, a property negotiation?
Thais, they often place a high value on community, on harmony. So decisions, they might be made, as a group, not just one person deciding everything.
More a team approach.
Exactly. Be prepared for group discussions. You want to find solutions that work for everybody, not just what's best for one person. And remember, patience is a virtue. Don't get frustrated if things seem slow.
Go with the flow.
Yes, focus on building those relationships.
Good advice. Okay, let's shift gears a bit, talk about what the future holds for Thai property law. Our guide pointed out some interesting trends. What do you see coming up?
One of the big things, it's technology. The Thai government, they're pushing for more digital transactions, making it easier to buy and sell property online.
So kind of a digital makeover for the property world.
Yeah, exactly. We're seeing more websites, tools for finding properties, checking those deeds, even signing contracts online. I think it's only going to get more digital, so being comfortable with technology, that's a big plus.
Tech skills are a must in the Thai property market these days. What about changes to the law itself? Any predictions?
Well, with more foreign investment coming in, it's possible the rules for foreign ownership might get a little tighter. It's about finding that balance, right?
Right.
Encourage investment, but also protect Thai citizens. So be ready for potential changes.
Stay flexible, stay informed.
Absolutely. And I think you'll see more focus on building in an eco-friendly way. The environment, it's a big concern in Thailand, so there might be stricter rules about construction and how they manage resources.
So building beautiful homes, but building them responsibly with the planet in mind.
Exactly. And don't forget, Thailand, they're part of ASEAN, right?
Hmm.
That could bring some interesting changes. Maybe the property laws across Southeast Asia will become more similar, making it easier to, buy and sell in different countries.
More interconnected, more opportunities for everyone.
That's the idea. Definitely something to watch.
All right, before we get into contract law, let's talk about the land department. It seems like that's where a lot of the action happens when it comes to, actually buying property.
You're right. The land department, they're the ones who handle everything related to land and property in Thailand, officially. They keep all the records, and they're the ones who register and document ownership. They're kind of the heart of the Thai property market.
So they're the official record keepers, the ones who make it all, legit. Walk us through that process. What happens when you need to register a property?
Okay, so first things first, get all your ducks in a row. I mean, your documents.
Okay.
The title deed, the sales and purchase agreement, all those important papers.
Be organized.
Exactly. Once you've got everything, you go to the local land office, the one in the area where the property is. You submit all those documents, pay the fees.
Sounds pretty straightforward then.
Then the land office, they go through everything, make sure it's all correct, and then they update their records to show the new owner you. And after that, you get your updated title deed with your name on it. That's the official proof that you're the owner.
It's the official handoff. You're a property owner in Thailand.
You got it. And for foreigners, there might be a few extra steps just to make sure everything follows those foreign ownership rules we talked about.
Makes sense. Our guide mentioned those potential delays at the land department. What causes those holdups and how can people avoid them?
A lot of times it's the paperwork. If it's not complete, if there are mistakes, that can cause delays. So double check everything, make sure it's all accurate, talk to your solicitor if you have any questions.
So it's all about being detail-oriented.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just that they're busy, they have so many transactions to process.
So again, patience is key.
It is. And while you're waiting, keep in touch with your solicitor and the land department, just checking in can sometimes help things move along.
Good advice. All right, we talked about the land department. Let's talk about those, legal pitfalls, those things nobody wants to think about, but it's good to be prepared. What are some of the common mistakes people make with Thai property law, and how can our listeners avoid them?
One of the, I guess the most common mistakes, and it can be a costly one, is not really taking the time to understand the title deed.
Right.
It's not just about proving you own the property. It's about understanding those restrictions, anything that might limit what you can do with the property.
So don't just skim it, really read it carefully.
Exactly. And another common mistake is those zoning laws. You got to check those. Different areas have different rules about what you can build, what you can use the property for.
You don't want to buy a place and then realize you can't build what you had in mind.
Nope, not at all.
Yeah.
Do your research, know the rules for the area you're interested in. And another thing, it's easy to underestimate how long things take in Thailand. The process can be slower than what you're used to, so just be patient. Factor that into your plans.
Patience is a superpower when you're buying property in Thailand, it sounds like.
It really is. Now let's talk about disputes. Those things happen, unfortunately. What if there's a legal issue, either during the buying process or even after the purchase is complete? What steps should people take?
What's the best way to handle it?
Okay, first, get organized. Gather all your documentation, contracts, emails, receipts, anything related to that property.
So document everything.
Yes, keep those records. Then talk to an expert, a lawyer who specializes in Thai property law. They can look at the situation, tell you what your rights are, help you figure out what to do.
Back to the solicitor, they're crucial.
They are. They'll help you figure out your best options. Maybe you can negotiate. Maybe there's mediation. And if you need to, they can help you with legal action.
And what about talking to the other person involved in the dispute?
It's always worth trying to work things out peacefully. Communicate, be respectful. You never know. Sometimes it's just a misunderstanding. You can clear it up with a conversation.
Find that common ground.
Exactly. But if you can't, then yeah, having that legal help, it's essential.
Okay, we talked about those pitfalls, any potential disputes. And let's switch gears a bit. Let's talk about that cultural side of things again. It's so important when you're buying property in Thailand. Our guide really stressed respecting those local customs and traditions. Why is that so crucial in property dealings?
Well, in Thai culture, being polite, respectful, and harmonious, those are really important values. And they carry over into business too, especially property transactions. Showing that you respect their culture, it helps build trust. It shows goodwill to the sellers, the officials, everyone you're dealing with.
So it's not just about the legalities, it's about those relationships, being sensitive to their culture.
Absolutely. Like the way you know about that is
Yeah.
the traditional greeting in Thailand.
Yeah.
Put your palms together, bow your head slightly. That shows respect.
It's like saying, I respect you and your culture without even saying a word.
Exactly. And dress modestly, especially when you're meeting with officials or going to religious sites. That's a sign of respect too.
So remember the way. Dress appropriately. Those are good starting points. What else should we be mindful of?
Remember saving face. That's super important in Thailand. Avoid getting angry in public, raising your voice, those kinds of things. Thais, they really value harmony. So approach any disagreements calmly, respectfully.
Keep a cool head.
Exactly. Now, about building that relationship with the seller, what are your thoughts on that? Thais, they really appreciate it when foreigners try to understand their culture, even their language. Learn a few basic phrases in Thai. It can go a long way. It's a sign of respect.
It shows you're trying to connect with them.
Yes, and be patient. Building those relationships, it takes time, especially in a culture that values those personal connections. Don't try to rush it.
No hard sell. It's about building that trust, that understanding.
Exactly. And think about sharing a meal. Food is a big part of Thai culture. Inviting a seller to a meal, that can be a great way to break the ice.
Instead of a formal meeting, let's have some delicious Thai food and connect. That's a much better approach.
I agree. Yeah, how do all these cultural things affect negotiations? What should people keep in mind about how Thais communicate, how they make decisions?
Well, Thais often communicate indirectly, especially if they're trying to avoid conflict or, making someone lose face. Pay attention to those subtle cues and don't hesitate to ask questions if you need to.
That's a really good point. Don't expect them to be super direct.
Hmm.
And they're more collaborative when it comes to making decisions. It's about finding a solution that works for the group, not just one person.
It's a team effort.
Exactly. And remember, hierarchy, respecting elders, people in authority, that's ingrained in Thai culture. So when you're dealing with those people, use the right titles, show respect.
It's all about understanding those social dynamics.
Precisely. When you understand these cultural nuances, your transactions will be smoother, you'll build trust, and show respect for their culture.
Great insights. Okay, let's look ahead. What's the future of Thai property law? Our guide talked about some interesting trends. What's changing?
One of the biggest trends is that everything's becoming more digital. The Thai government, they're making it easier to buy and sell property online.
Bringing those property transactions into the digital age.
Exactly. More websites, more online resources. I think it's only going to get more digital, so the more comfortable you are with technology, the better.
So those tech skills, they're definitely an asset. What about the law itself? Any predictions on how that might change?
Well, we're seeing more and more foreign investment in Thai property, so it's possible those rules about foreign ownership might change, maybe get a bit stricter. It's about finding that balance, encouraging investment, but also protecting Thai citizens.
So it's a dynamic market. Got to stay informed.
Absolutely. And I think we'll see a bigger focus on sustainable development.
Mm.
Protecting the environment is becoming more important in Thailand, so I think there will be stricter rules about construction.
So building beautiful homes, but in a way that's responsible, right?
Exactly. And don't forget, ASEAN, Thailand's part of that, and that could lead to some changes. Maybe property laws across Southeast Asia will become more similar, making it easier to buy and sell in different countries in the region.
More interconnected, a more regional market.
Exactly. It's definitely something to keep an eye on.
All right, we've covered a lot today, the cultural side of things, the land department, and even peeked into the future of Thai property law. But before we wrap up part two, let's talk about contracts. They're a big part of any property deal, and it's important to understand how Thai contract law works.
You're right. Contracts, they're essential in Thailand. They're legally binding documents that lay out all the details of the agreement between the buyer and the seller.
So it's more than just a handshake, it's a real legal document.
Exactly. And it has to be clear. The purchase price, the payment terms, any special conditions, everything's got to be spelled out. No room for ambiguity.
So no assumptions, everything clearly written down.
Absolutely. Both the buyer and the seller have to understand what they're agreeing to. If anything's unclear, ask questions before you sign anything.
If it doesn't make sense, don't be afraid to ask. What about if someone breaks the contract? What are the implications of that in Thailand?
Well, breaking a contract, that can have serious consequences here.
Yeah.
The person who was harmed, they can take legal action, go to court, maybe ask for compensation, or even demand that the contract be fulfilled.
So it's not something to take lightly.
No. Thai courts, they take contracts seriously. They look at all the details, the intent, to make a fair decision.
So a well-written contract is, it's like an insurance policy. It protects you.
Exactly. So any tips for negotiating contracts? What's your advice?
Well, before you even start, know what you want. What are those non-negotiables for you? What are you willing to be flexible on? Be clear about your priorities and be ready to communicate them.
That's a good point. And remember, listen to the other side. Negotiation, it's a two-way street. You want to find a solution that works for everyone, so be open to compromise, try to see their perspective.
And don't rush into anything.
Exactly. Take your time, understand the information, ask questions. If you're not sure about something, get legal advice.
Great advice. Okay, that wraps up part two of our deep dive. We've talked about cultural considerations, the land department, contract law, and even a little bit about the future of Thai property law.
It's been a lot of information, but with the right knowledge and guidance, navigating the Thai property market, it can be a really positive experience.
Absolutely. And we're not done yet. We've got one more part to go. We'll talk about those recent changes in Thai property law, some of those future trends we touched on, and wrap up with some final thoughts. So stick with us.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. We're wrapping up our deep dive into Thai property law, and we've come a long way. But there's one last thing to explore, that's the future. Where is Thai property law headed? Yeah, good point. It's always changing, so it's smart to, stay ahead of the game, see what's coming down the road.
Okay, so let's get those crystal balls out. What do you see happening? What trends, what changes?
Well, one thing that's already happening is that shift towards digital everything, the Thai government, they're really pushing for a more tech-driven approach, buying, selling, making it faster, more secure.
So like properties going digital in Thailand.
Yeah, exactly. More and more online resources for everything, searching for properties, checking those title deeds, even signing contracts. That trend's only going to grow. So anyone who's, comfortable online, they'll have an advantage.
Time to polish up those tech skills then. What about the laws themselves? Any predictions for how those might evolve?
Well, Thailand's becoming a real hotspot for foreign investors, so it's possible those rules about how much foreigners can own, they might change. maybe become a bit stricter.
Okay.
The government wants to find that sweet spot, attract those investments, but also, look out for their citizens, their interests.
So be ready to adapt, stay informed.
Exactly. And I think you'll see a bigger push for sustainable development, eco-friendly stuff,
Right.
protecting the environment. It's a big deal in Thailand now, so expect some tougher rules about how properties are built, how they manage resources.
So building beautiful properties, but doing it in a way that's good for the planet too.
Exactly. And speaking of connections, remember Thailand's part of ASEAN, and that could shake things up a bit, legally speaking. We might see those property laws become um, more unified across the region,
Okay.
making it easier for people to buy and sell in different countries in Southeast Asia.
So breaking down those barriers, more opportunities.
That's the idea. It's
Yeah.
definitely something to watch.
All right. Well, we've covered a lot in this deep dive. The different types of ownership, the legal processes, all those important documents, even how the land department works, the financial side of things, how to find a good agent, how to steer clear of legal trouble, and what to do if a dispute pops up.
It's a lot, yeah.
And of course, we talked about how important it is to understand Thai culture when you're buying property there. It's been quite a journey.
It has. But I think the most important thing for people to remember is even though Thai property law, it can seem complicated, it's totally doable as long as you're prepared, you have the right guidance.
Absolutely. Don't let the legal stuff or those cultural differences scare you off. Embrace the adventure, do your research, and remember, buying property in Thailand, it's more than just, a transaction. It's a chance to experience a new culture, make some memories.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Thai property law. Big thanks to our expert for sharing all their insights.
My pleasure.
And to all our listeners, we hope this deep dive has given you the information you need, maybe even inspired you to, take the plunge, keep learning, keep asking questions, and happy house hunting. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.